In a moment of desperation, a mother walks into a billionaire's office, ready to sacrifice everything for her daughter's life. What happens next will leave you speechless. A single mother enters the cold, imposing offices of Blackwood Enterprises, her hands trembling and her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "Please, just make it quick," she whispers, her voice barely audible as the weight of desperation pushes her to the edge. With her daughter Maya's life hanging in the balance and no other options left, Eliza Hunt is willing to do anything to save her child. But instead of dismissing her, the billionaire CEO, Grayson Blackwood, does something completely unexpected. Known for his ruthless business acumen and icy demeanor, Grayson's expression softens as he listens. Instead of turning her away, he offers a lifeline, a chance for Eliza to save her daughter without the price of her dignity. It's a gesture that shocks Eliza to her core, changing both their lives forever. What begins as a simple act of compassion soon spirals into a storm of rumors, gossip, and a battle for reputations. As the world learns about their connection, Grayson's cold, untouchable image begins to crumble, and the truth behind his kindness threatens to destroy everything he's built. Hidden secrets from his past resurface, secrets that could tear apart everything they've come to understand about love, power, and redemption. Behind the polished exterior of Blackwood Enterprises, the lines between right and wrong, business and heart, blur. Will Grayson and Eliza survive the fallout? Or will their willingness to trust and care for each other cost them everything? Stay tuned, because the truth has a way of unraveling, and when it does, it may just set them free, or break them forever. The rain pelts against the windows of Grayson's office, casting shifting shadows across his pristine desk. Eliza stands at the doorway, her hands clenched around the crumpled eviction notice, her heart pounding in her chest. She struggles to meet Grayson's cold, assessing gaze. Her voice catches in her throat. "Please, just make it quick." Eliza Hunt stood frozen in the sleek, polished lobby of Blackwood Enterprises, the towering glass walls reflecting the cold, indifferent skyline. She gripped the crumpled eviction notice in her trembling hand, the paper sharp against her skin as if it were a reminder of every failed attempt to save her daughter, Maya. She had already exhausted every option, second jobs, countless calls for help, even selling her precious family heirlooms, but nothing had been enough. Now, her little girl was fighting for her life in a way that Eliza couldn't fight back against. Maya's heart condition was worsening with each passing day. The doctors had been blunt. She needed surgery, and quickly. Without it, Maya didn't have long. "Please," Eliza's voice cracked as she whispered to herself, "just make it quick." The words were a quiet plea to the universe, to fate, to anyone who could save her daughter. She didn't expect to find salvation in Blackwood Enterprises, the symbol of corporate power, ice-cold success, and above all, distance from the ordinary world. But here she was, standing in front of the man who held the kind of power she could never hope to understand. Grayson Blackwood, the billionaire CEO who built his empire on a reputation as ruthless, cold, and untouchable. The receptionist had directed her up, offering her a polite smile that never reached her eyes, the same kind of professionalism Eliza had grown accustomed to in her years of struggling to survive. Now, she was at the top of the tower, the one place where she had no right to be, with nothing but a desperate wish that Grayson might be willing to help. As she stepped into his office, the sharp scent of leather, mahogany, and expensive cologne filled the air. The rain had begun to fall outside, tapping rhythmically against the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting shadows across the room. Grayson Blackwood sat behind his desk, his gaze sharp, focused on his tablet. For a moment, Eliza hesitated. She was a mother fighting for her daughter's life, but she felt so small in this grand, cold office. Her knees felt weak beneath her, and her heart raced in her chest. "Mr. Blackwood," she began, her voice a mere whisper. She swallowed hard, trying to gather herself. "Please, just make it quick." She held up the eviction notice in her trembling hands, but Grayson's expression remained unreadable. His eyes, a sharp steel gray, flicked up to meet hers. He studied her for a moment, the intensity of his gaze making her want to shrink further into herself. He didn't flinch. He didn't look away. "Tell me what this is about," he said, his voice low and controlled, without any hint of sympathy. Eliza's words spilled out, rushed, as if she couldn't say them fast enough. She told him about Maya, about her daughter's fragile life, the expensive surgery she needed, the hospital bills piling up, and her inability to pay for any of it. She described how she'd sold everything they owned, how her daughter's condition had continued to deteriorate, and how she was running out of time. When she was done speaking, the room was silent, except for the sound of the rain. Grayson didn't immediately respond. For a long, agonizing moment, Eliza feared he would dismiss her like everyone else had, another hopeless case that had come to him asking for charity. But instead, he surprised her. He placed the tablet down on the desk and stood, walking around to the side of his desk, his towering presence now looming in front of her. "I'll help you," he said, his tone firm but devoid of emotion. Eliza blinked, unsure she had heard him right. He paused, his gaze not leaving hers. "I'll pay for your daughter's surgery," he added, "and I'll help with your housing, but in return, you'll work for me." The words hung in the air, heavy with unexpected generosity. Eliza's heart pounded, but she could hardly process them. "Work for you?" she echoed, her voice trembling. Grayson nodded. "As my personal assistant. You'll have full medical coverage for Maya's treatment, and I'll take care of everything else. You'll work hard for it, of course." Eliza stared at him, still stunned, the eviction notice still gripped tightly in her hand. Her mind raced, trying to comprehend what he was offering. He was offering her something no one had ever given her, hope. But she also knew she couldn't accept this without a price. He wasn't doing this out of kindness alone. He wanted something in return. "Why?" Eliza asked, finally finding her voice again. "Why are you doing this?" Grayson's expression didn't soften, but something flickered in his eyes, almost imperceptibly. "Your father, George Hunt. He was the janitor here once, years ago. He helped me when I needed it most. This is a small repayment." Eliza's breath caught in her throat. Her father had never mentioned anything about helping someone like Grayson Blackwood. But the mention of his name stirred something in her, a connection, a bridge that Eliza hadn't realized was still there. She nodded slowly, unable to find words to fully express the rush of emotions flooding through her. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The tears that had threatened to spill earlier now came rushing to the surface. She had no idea what this meant for her future, but in this moment, her daughter's life seemed a little less uncertain. Grayson didn't respond, but his gaze softened just a fraction, as if he was already expecting the gratitude. Eliza turned to leave, the weight of her decision pressing down on her. She didn't know what kind of world she was stepping into, but for the first time in weeks, she felt like there was a glimmer of hope. Eliza's mind was a whirlwind as she walked out of Grayson Blackwood's office. The weight of the decision she'd just made pressed down on her chest. The surgery, Maya's future, the job, everything was tied to a man she had only just met. A man whose generosity could either save them or ruin them. Her hand shook as she closed the door behind her, the sound of the latch clicking in the stillness of the hallway. For the first time in her life, she was stepping into a world that had once felt completely out of reach. But at what cost? She couldn't help but wonder if she was trading one kind of desperation for another. She stopped briefly by the window in the hallway, glancing out at the city below. The rain had stopped, but the sky was still overcast, casting a dim light over the streets. It matched her mood, hopeful but uncertain. Eliza's thoughts were interrupted by a voice calling her name. "Ms. Hunt, right?" It was Olivia Davis, Grayson's secretary. She looked as polished and composed as Eliza had imagined, dressed in a neat skirt suit, her blonde hair pulled back into a tight bun. "Yes, "I'm Eliza," she replied, still somewhat lost in her thoughts. "I'll show you to your office," Olivia said, her smile professional but warm. Mr. Blackwood's instructions were clear. "He expects you to start immediately." Eliza nodded, trying to steady herself. "Right, thank you." As they walked through the corridors, Olivia chatted about the company's policies, expectations, and the high standards Grayson held for his employees. Eliza listened, but struggled to absorb everything. This was a far cry from the world she'd known, where the biggest challenge had been balancing two jobs to make ends meet. She was introduced to a small, neat office on the lower level, tucked away from the grand open spaces where the executives worked. It was nothing like the intimidating grandeur of Grayson's office. A simple desk, a comfortable chair, and a window that didn't offer much of a view. But Eliza didn't care about the size or the surroundings. She only cared about Maya's surgery, about getting her daughter the care she needed. "I'll leave you to settle in," Olivia said, as she stepped out, leaving Eliza alone in the small office. For a long moment, Eliza stood by the desk, her hands still trembling. She wasn't sure what to do first. She could hear the distant hum of activity outside, the sounds of a corporate world she had no part in until today. The enormity of it all hit her. Grayson Blackwood, the man she had come to for help, had given her a second chance, but at what cost? Was it just an act of kindness, or did he expect her to owe him more than she could ever give? The door to her office opened with a soft creak, and Eliza looked up, startled. Vivian Price, Grayson's assistant, stepped into the room. Her gaze flicked over Eliza with a slight, almost imperceptible sneer. "Miss Hunt, I presume," Vivian said, her voice smooth but carrying an edge of skepticism. "I'm sure you're grateful for Mr. Blackwood's generosity. Not everyone gets such an offer." Eliza's stomach tightened. She'd already heard the rumors about Vivian. The assistant had a reputation for being sharp and territorial, and Eliza could already feel the tension between them. "I am," Eliza said, trying to sound confident. "I'm just trying to get used to all of this." Vivian gave her a tight smile. "Of course. Well, just remember, you're here to work, not to make waves. Mr. Blackwood doesn't take kindly to distractions, especially ones that might hurt his reputation." Eliza nodded, suddenly feeling small again. "I understand," she replied, forcing herself to stay composed. Vivian's smile didn't reach her eyes as she turned on her heel and left the room, leaving Eliza to stew in the silence. The weight of the day's events settled over her once again. She sat down at her desk, the cold edge of the metal against her palms grounding her. This was a new beginning, or at least it could be. But there were so many questions about Grayson, about herself, and about the future. She looked at the photo of Maya on her desk, the little girl's bright eyes staring back at her. No matter what this job cost her, she would do whatever it took to protect her daughter. Eliza's first day at Blackwood Enterprises was nothing short of overwhelming. She had barely gotten through the door when the steady pace of the office made her feel like a deer caught in headlights. The glossy, pristine floors and cold metallic walls were a far cry from the small, cramped apartment she and Maya had lived in. She had been a single mother her whole life, doing her best to juggle jobs and bills, but nothing prepared her for this world. The world of power suits, endless meetings, and people who seemed to have everything under control. Her new desk was small, tucked away in a corner of a hallway that led to executive offices, not far from the break room. It was a far cry from the sleek glass and steel wonder of Grayson's office, but Eliza didn't care. She was just grateful to have a job, to have the opportunity to give Maya a chance at life. As she tried to settle in, the reality of her situation hit her. She wasn't just another new employee here. She was the woman who'd been given an unbelievable offer by the Billionaire CEO. And that made her an outsider in the eyes of the others. Vivian Price had made that clear earlier. The woman's icy tone and pointed comments about Mr. Blackwood's generosity had stung, but Eliza wasn't there to make friends. She was there to work, to prove herself, and to do everything she could to protect her daughter. The office around her was buzzing with activity, but there was a distance, a professional coldness that made her feel like she didn't belong. She spent most of the morning going through files, answering calls, and setting up meetings, things she'd never dreamed of doing in the world she knew. Everything was so meticulous, so controlled. Each step had to be perfect. She could already feel the pressure of the expectations weighing on her shoulders. As she sat at her desk, organizing her schedule for the week, Eliza couldn't help but notice the way some of her co-workers looked at her. A few of them seemed curious, maybe even sympathetic, but the majority looked at her with barely concealed skepticism. Vivian had made it clear that this position wasn't one to be taken lightly. Eliza had no doubt that she would have to work twice as hard to earn respect here, especially with whispers already starting about her sudden rise to prominence. Her thoughts were interrupted by a light knock on the door. "Ms. Hunt?" It was Olivia Davis, Grayson's secretary, her voice warm but professional. "Mr. Blackwood would like to see you in his office." Eliza felt her stomach lurch. She had barely started settling in, and already she was being summoned. She quickly stood, smoothing the wrinkles from her skirt. "Thank you," she replied, her voice betraying none of the anxiety she felt inside. As they walked down the hallway, Olivia explained that Grayson wanted to go over her schedule and review a few of the projects she would be involved with. Eliza nodded, though she couldn't shake the feeling that this meeting had less to do with work and more to do with her role in his life. Grayson's office loomed ahead, and Eliza's heart rate picked up. She had never been in this kind of space. Dark wood, soft lighting, and views of the city that were both breathtaking and intimidating. He was standing by the window, looking out at the skyline, his back to her. "You wanted to see me, Mr. Blackwood?" Eliza asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Grayson turned slowly, his piercing gaze assessing her with that same cold, calculating look she had seen the first time they met. But this time, there was something else, something faintly softer, almost like a crack in the armor he wore so well. "I just wanted to make sure you're settling in okay," he said, his tone businesslike but with an undercurrent of something more. "I am," Eliza said, the words coming out faster than she intended. "Thank you. It's just a lot to take in, but I'm doing my best." Grayson nodded, his gaze never leaving hers. "Good. You'll be handling the schedule for the next board meeting and some of the client presentations. I expect you to keep everything running smoothly." Eliza swallowed, feeling the pressure building. "Of course. I'm also aware that this position isn't a typical one for someone with your background," Grayson continued, his voice steady. "But I believe in second chances. I want to give you the opportunity to prove yourself here, not just to me, but to the company. Do you understand?" Eliza blinked, surprised by the directness of his words. "I do, and I'll do my best to earn your trust." Grayson's lips twitched into something resembling a smile, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "That's all I ask." He turned back toward the window, signaling that the conversation was over. Eliza stood for a moment, unsure if she should leave or wait. Finally, she took the cue, walking slowly toward the door. As she placed her hand on the handle, Grayson's voice stopped her. "Ms. Hunt," he said, and she turned back. "You're doing the right thing. I believe that." Eliza nodded, though her heart was racing. Was he just speaking about her job, or was there more to his words? Did he truly believe in her, or was this all part of a larger, more complicated game she wasn't fully a part of yet? The door closed softly behind her, and Eliza stood outside in the hallway, her mind swirling. For the first time, she questioned everything. Was this really about saving Maya? Or was she walking into something far deeper than she could have ever anticipated? Eliza settled into her routine over the next few days, each one blurring into the next. She was determined to prove herself, to work harder than anyone else, and show that she deserved the second chance Grayson had given her. But no matter how hard she tried to focus on her work, the rumors in the office were hard to ignore. They started small, whispers in the break room, passing comments when she walked by, but they grew louder with each passing day. Vivian Price, Grayson's assistant, was the ringleader. Every time Eliza saw her, there was a sharp edge to her smile, a coldness in her eyes. The other employees were no different, casting her suspicious glances and gossiping behind her back. It wasn't just about the job. It was about Eliza herself, the woman who had been handed everything by Grayson Blackwood, the woman who had no business being here. One afternoon, as Eliza was preparing documents for a board meeting, she overheard a conversation in the hallway. Vivian was speaking in hushed tones to a colleague. "It's obvious why she's here," Vivian said with a mocking laugh. "Mr. Blackwood is softening up, and she's taking full advantage of it. I'm sure she has other assets she's offering, but she's playing it smart, using her daughter as an excuse." Eliza froze, her heart sinking. She hadn't expected the gossip to be so open, so personal. She wasn't prepared for the cruelty of it. But what hurt the most was how accurate it felt. She had no idea if Grayson's help was just out of the kindness of his heart, or if there was something else driving his decision. Was she just a pawn in a game she didn't understand? She quickly turned away, swallowing the lump in her throat. She wasn't here to defend herself. She was here for one reason, and one reason only: Maya. And if she had to endure the whispers, the judgment, then so be it. That afternoon, Eliza sat in her small office, trying to focus on the tasks at hand, but her thoughts kept drifting back to the rumors. Her phone buzzed with a notification from the news app, and she clicked on it absent-mindedly. The headline made her stomach drop. Billionaire CEO's mysterious assistant, a gold digger, or just a desperate mother. Her breath caught in her chest as she read through the article. The media had caught wind of her and Grayson's connection, spinning the story into something salacious and sordid. The article hinted at a possible affair, suggested Eliza was using her daughter's illness as leverage to climb the corporate ladder. The more she read, the more it felt like she was drowning in a storm of lies. The phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Grayson. "I need to speak with you. Meet me in my office." Eliza's heart pounded in her chest. She didn't know what to expect. Was he going to fire her? Was he going to distance himself from her like the rumors suggested? When she arrived at his office, Grayson was standing by the window, staring out at the city below. The tension in the air was palpable. "Mr. Blackwood, she began, but he cut her off with a single wave of his hand. "Sit down, Eliza," he said, his voice steady but laced with something that made her uneasy. She sat, her hands folding nervously in her lap. "Have you seen the article?" Grayson asked, his eyes never leaving the window. Eliza nodded. "Yes, I saw it." "I know about the rumors," he said, turning to face her. "And I want to be clear. I don't care what they say. You're here because I chose to help you. You're here because you're capable, and I believe in your potential. Don't let them convince you otherwise." His words were firm, but there was something about the way he spoke, something distant, that made Eliza feel like an outsider all over again. She wanted to believe him, but the pressure of the situation, the weight of the public scrutiny, was too much. "Grayson, she started, but she didn't know how to express everything she was feeling. Anger, confusion, self-doubt. She didn't know if she could handle it anymore. Grayson's expression softened, and he took a step closer to her. "Eliza, I've been in this world long enough to know how it works. People will always talk. They'll always try to tear you down, but I hired you because I see something in you that others don't. Don't let their voices drown out the reason you're here." For a moment, Eliza just sat there, his words sinking in. She wanted to believe him. She really did. But how could she trust him? How could she trust herself when everything was so uncertain? "Mr. Blackwood, Grayson," she began, her voice steady but quiet. "I'm not here because of you. I'm here because of my daughter. If I stay, it's because I need this job to give her a chance at life. I don't want to owe anyone anything. Not you, not anyone. Grayson studied her for a long moment, and for the first time, Eliza saw a flicker of understanding in his eyes. I know, he said quietly. I know. And I'm not asking you to owe me anything. But you have to trust me when I say that you belong here. You deserve this opportunity. The words hung between them, and for a moment, Eliza let herself believe in the possibility that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't just a charity case to Grayson Blackwood. Grayson's decision to stand by her had sent shockwaves through the company, and the fallout was almost immediate. Eliza could feel the tension in the air, as if everyone in the office had held their breath until the storm passed. But the storm wasn't over, not by a long shot. It had only just begun. Eliza had never seen Grayson so resolute. He had made it clear that he wasn't going to back down, that he would stand by her, no matter the consequences. But what did that really mean? As much as Eliza appreciated his defense, the question still lingered. Was this truly about her and her daughter? Or was there something else beneath the surface? She couldn't help but wonder if Grayson was using this situation to redeem himself in the eyes of others. After all, he was a man who had built his empire on control, on power. How much of his decision to help her was about the right thing, and how much was about righting some unspoken wrong in his past? The company's executives were less than thrilled about Grayson's defense of Eliza. The whispers in the boardroom were sharp and critical. Some even suggested that Grayson had lost his edge, that he was no longer the man who had built Blackwood Enterprises into the juggernaut it was today. Eliza had never been in a position like this, standing in the midst of so much power, with so many people pulling strings behind the scenes. She wasn't sure she could handle the pressure. But as the days went by, she realized something. No matter how uncomfortable or daunting it felt, she couldn't back down. Maya's health was at stake, and Eliza had no other choice but to see this through. One afternoon, Grayson called her into his office for another meeting. This time, his demeanor was different. He wasn't the cold, calculated businessman she had first met. There was something softer in his eyes, something more human. "Eliza," he began, his voice quieter than usual. "We need to talk about the board." Eliza felt a chill run through her. "What's going on?" "They want you gone," Grayson said bluntly, his tone hardening. "They think you're a distraction. They don't believe you belong here." Eliza swallowed, the weight of his words pressing down on her. She had known it was coming, the whispers, the judgment, but hearing it out loud felt different. It felt real. "I won't let them push you out," Grayson continued. "But if they do, I'll walk away from this company. I won't let them ruin what we've started." Eliza's heart pounded. "Grayson, you can't do that. You've worked your whole life for this." "I don't care about this company anymore," he said, his voice low but resolute. "Not if it means sacrificing what really matters." Eliza was speechless. The idea of Grayson walking away from everything he had built was unthinkable. She didn't want him to make that sacrifice. He didn't deserve to lose everything just because of her. "I'll quit," Eliza said quickly, trying to backpedal. "You don't have to do that for me." Grayson shook his head, his expression firm. "No, I'll fight for you. I'll fight for both of us. I'm not backing down." The resolve in his voice was unwavering, but Eliza wasn't sure if she was ready for the consequences of such a drastic move. Could they really stand against the board, the public, the media? Could they survive the fallout? As the week progressed, Grayson's decision to stand by her became more and more public. The media, ever eager for scandal, picked up on his bold stance, painting him as either a hero or a fool. The board members, sensing Grayson's resolve, began to grumble, but they remained silent for the moment. Eliza's world felt like it was spinning out of control. Everywhere she looked, there were people watching, waiting to see what would happen next. The pressure was suffocating. She had no idea how much longer she could keep up the facade of calm, of composure. But then, something unexpected happened. Late one evening, as Eliza was reviewing documents at her desk, a familiar face appeared at her door. Vivian Price. She was standing there, arms crossed, her usual cold smile absent. "I need to speak with you," Vivian said, her voice more subdued than usual. Eliza looked up, wary. "What about?" Vivian hesitated, and for the first time, Eliza saw a flicker of something like vulnerability in her eyes. "I'm sorry for the way I treated you," she said quietly. "I was wrong." Eliza's eyes widened in surprise. "What are you talking about?" Vivian stepped into the room, closing the door behind her. "I've been a part of this company for years, and I've seen it all. The ambition, the manipulation, the power struggles. I thought I had it all figured out, but then I saw how much Grayson cares about you, and I realized something. He's never made a decision like this before. He's never fought for anyone like this, not even for himself." Eliza sat back in her chair, processing Vivian's words. This wasn't the woman she had expected to be standing in front of her, but here she was, offering an apology, showing a side of herself Eliza hadn't seen before. "I don't know if I can believe you," Eliza said cautiously. Vivian nodded, her gaze softening. "I understand, but I need you to know that I've got your back now. You're not alone in this." For the first time, Eliza felt a sense of relief wash over her. It wasn't just Grayson fighting for her anymore. There were people, real people, who believed in her, and maybe, just maybe, they could make it through this together. The press conference was the turning point. Grayson had called for it without hesitation, making it clear that he wasn't going to let the rumors spiral out of control. The media had turned him into a villain, painting him as a man who had given in to a young woman's desperation. The whispers about his so-called affair with Eliza had only fueled the fire, making headlines that spread like wildfire. But Grayson was determined to rewrite the narrative. Eliza stood backstage, her hands shaking as she adjusted her outfit for what felt like the 100th time. She had never imagined that she would be at the center of a media storm like this, but here she was, caught in the crossfire of corporate power, media sensationalism, and her own growing connection with Grayson. She had already made up her mind to stand by him, but she wasn't sure what to expect when the cameras started flashing and the reporters turned their lenses on her. Would they see her as the victim of a ruthless media attack, or would they continue to twist the story into something darker? As the event began, the room was filled with the low hum of reporters and cameras snapping, eager to capture the first glimpse of the real story. Grayson stepped onto the stage, his usual cold demeanor replaced with something more human, more open. Eliza had never seen him like this, and for a moment she was reminded of the man who had stood by her when she needed him most. "Thank you all for being here," Grayson began, his voice calm but carrying a weight that made the room quiet instantly. "I'm sure you've heard many things about me and Ms. Hunt, and I'm here today to clear the air." Eliza stood at the side of the stage, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't know what to expect from this press conference, but she knew one thing: Grayson was about to expose himself in a way that would forever change his public image. He went on, explaining how Eliza had come to him in a desperate situation, her daughter fighting for her life and her family on the verge of losing everything. He didn't sugarcoat it. He spoke about her father, George Hunt, and how the janitor's simple act of kindness had impacted his life when he had been just a young intern. Grayson didn't hide the fact that he owed George Hunt for more than just the kindness he had shown. He owed him a part of himself. "I offered Ms. Hunt help, not because of any ulterior motive, but because I wanted to," Grayson said, his eyes scanning the room. "Because her father taught me something important about kindness, and I'm proud to offer her the chance to save her daughter's life." The words hung in the air, and for a brief moment the room was silent. It was a statement of truth that Eliza hadn't expected, and yet it felt like the right thing to say. She had feared that Grayson would distance himself from her, would retract his offer of help, but here he was, standing in front of the world, declaring that he wasn't ashamed of his decision. "I know some of you may not believe me, and I know there are rumors about Ms. Hunt's intentions," Grayson continued, his voice unwavering. "But I will not apologize for helping a mother in need, and I will not let anyone tear down her character or mine for doing what's right." Eliza felt her breath catch in her throat as Grayson's words settled in. This wasn't just about her anymore. This was about him, too. He was risking everything, his reputation, his company, his public image, for her. As the press conference went on, the media began to ask pointed questions, their skepticism still evident. Some reporters questioned whether Grayson's defense of Eliza was genuine. Others suggested it was a strategic move to repair his public image. But with each question, Grayson remained composed, his answers steadfast. Eliza didn't speak. She didn't need to. Grayson had already spoken for them both, and his words had more weight than anything she could say. When the press conference finally ended, Eliza felt both exhausted and relieved. The room cleared out slowly, reporters dispersing into small groups, their chatter continuing. But as the last of the media left, Grayson turned to Eliza, his expression more relaxed than she had ever seen it. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice softer now that the cameras were gone. Eliza nodded, unsure if the tears that had been threatening to spill were from relief or fear. "I think so." Grayson walked toward her, his steps steady. "You did well," he said, his tone unexpectedly warm. "You held your ground." Eliza's heart pounded in her chest, and for a moment, she didn't know how to respond. She was overwhelmed by everything that had happened, the press conference, the rumors, the truth. But most of all, she was overwhelmed by Grayson's unwavering support. "Thank you," she finally managed, her voice small. Grayson didn't say anything more. He simply nodded, his expression unreadable. But as they stood there, the weight of the world pressing down on them, Eliza felt something shift between them, a quiet understanding, a bond forged through the chaos they had just faced together. Eliza wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she wasn't alone in this fight. She wasn't the only one taking risks for the people she loved. The weeks following the press conference felt like an endless game of tug-of-war. Grayson's bold move to defend Eliza had brought a wave of attention, but not the kind of attention anyone could have predicted. The media, initially skeptical, had turned in his favor to some extent, but the corporate world was a different story. The board, which had remained relatively silent during the initial storm, now found themselves on the defensive. They had not expected Grayson to stand so firmly behind Eliza. And they certainly hadn't expected him to put his career and the future of Blackwood Enterprises on the line for her. Eliza had hoped, in some small part, that the world would move on, that they could put the scandal behind them and get back to normal. But the whispers in the hallways had only grown louder. Even those who had once been cordial now viewed her with suspicion. One morning, as she was gathering paperwork in the break room, she overheard a conversation between two of her colleagues. "I don't know what he's thinking," one woman said. "Defending her like that? It's bad for business." The other voice was more sympathetic. "But she's just a mother trying to save her daughter. You saw the story. It's not like she asked for this." Eliza's stomach churned at the implication. She didn't know if they were talking about her or just speculating about Grayson's intentions, but she couldn't ignore the undercurrent of doubt. The idea that she was somehow using her daughter's illness to climb the corporate ladder stung in ways she hadn't expected. And as much as she tried to tell herself that she wasn't here because of Grayson's kindness, the truth was that it felt like a delicate balancing act. Back in her office, Eliza had just finished organizing some financial reports when she received a call from Grayson's personal line. "Eliza," his voice was calm but with an edge that made her pause. "I need to talk to you. Can you come to my office?" She felt a knot form in her stomach. a mixture of anxiety and anticipation. "Of course," she replied, her voice tight. "I'll be right there." When Eliza entered his office, Grayson was standing by the window, looking out over the city. The tension between them was palpable, as if the weight of the world had settled in that room. "Sit down," he said without turning around, and Eliza obeyed. "I've been thinking a lot about the board," Grayson began, his tone quieter now. "They're pressuring me to distance myself from you. They believe that our connection is too risky for the company's reputation." Eliza nodded, her throat tight. She had expected this. She had known that the moment Grayson stood up for her, the wheels of corporate politics would start turning. "And what do you want to do?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Grayson turned to face her, his eyes cold, yet strangely tender. "I'm not going to back down," he said, his jaw tightening. "But I'm also not going to let them destroy everything I've worked for. The pressure's mounting, Eliza. You know that." Eliza sat silently for a moment, processing the weight of his words. She had never asked for this, never wanted to be a part of the corporate battles or power struggles. She just wanted to save her daughter. "Grayson, She paused, unsure of how to continue. "I don't want to be the reason you lose everything. I don't want to be the one who drags you down." Grayson walked toward her slowly, stopping just in front of her desk. "You're not dragging me down. The only person who can do that is me. I'm not going to let them use you as a scapegoat. We'll figure this out, together." Eliza looked up at him, and for the first time in days, she saw the vulnerability in his eyes. She had always known him as the cold, ruthless businessman, the man who had everything and didn't hesitate to use his power. But now, she saw the cracks beneath the surface. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to trust that this wasn't just about saving face for him or protecting his empire. But it was hard to shake the feeling that there was more to the story, that there were parts of Grayson's past that he wasn't ready to share with her. "I'm doing this for you, Eliza," Grayson continued, his voice low. "But I'm also doing it for myself. I've spent my whole life building this empire, but it's never been about what I've accumulated. It's about something else. Something that's been missing, and I see that in you. I see that in your fight for your daughter." Eliza's heart ached with the truth in his words. She wanted to believe him, but there was still that nagging feeling, that fear that he might just be using her as a way to atone for something in his past. "I'm scared," she confessed, her voice trembling. "Scared of losing everything. Scared that you're doing this for the wrong reasons." Grayson's expression softened, and he reached across the desk, taking her hand in his. "I'm not asking you to trust me right away," he said, his voice gentle. "I'm just asking you to let me prove it to you. Let me show you that this isn't just about some corporate move. This is about something real." For a moment, they sat there in silence, the weight of their words hanging in the air between them. Eliza wasn't sure if she was ready to let herself fall, but there was something in Grayson's gaze, something that made her want to believe. The door opened suddenly, and Vivian stepped into the room, her eyes flicking between the two of them. Eliza pulled her hand away quickly, as if she'd been caught in something she wasn't supposed to be a part of. Grayson's gaze hardened as he looked at Vivian. "What is it?" Vivian hesitated before speaking. "The board wants a meeting. They're pushing for your decision on Eliza. They're giving you a deadline." Grayson exhaled sharply, his jaw clenched. "We'll deal with it," he said, standing up. "But I'm not giving in. Not this time." As Vivian left the room, Eliza stood slowly, her heart still heavy with doubt. "You don't have to do this for me, Grayson. I never asked you to risk your whole career." Grayson turned to face her, his expression resolute. "But you didn't have to ask. I'm doing this because it's the right thing to do, and I'm not backing down." Grayson's decision to stand firm, despite the mounting pressure from the board, marked a new chapter in both their lives. The media frenzy had started to die down after the press conference, but the corporate world was less forgiving. Every day, Eliza felt like she was living on the edge of a cliff, teetering between stability and the inevitable fall. Grayson's confidence, his willingness to defend her, was a comfort, but it also weighed on her shoulders. The foundation he had promised to start in honor of her father was becoming a reality. Yet, Eliza couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something far larger than she was ready to handle. Grayson, however, was unwavering. He spent his days meeting with lawyers, speaking with potential donors, and consulting with experts to get the Hunt Foundation off the ground. Eliza had initially thought it would take months to get everything in place, but Grayson's speed was startling. The legal paperwork was completed quickly, the financial backing already secured. As the foundation began to take shape, Grayson offered Eliza the leadership role, solidifying her place in his world. It was a huge leap for her. She had gone from working multiple jobs to support her daughter, to leading a foundation that would help thousands of families. The shift was surreal. Eliza wasn't sure she could handle all the responsibility, but she couldn't turn back, not now. The foundation's mission was simple but powerful, to provide medical assistance and support for families facing life-threatening illnesses. Grayson had poured his heart into it, in honor of George Hunt, who had shown him the kind of kindness he had never experienced in his privileged life. But with all the good that was happening, the media and corporate pressure was never far behind. Landon Pierce, Grayson's rival, continued to spread lies and rumors, trying to bring down the billionaire's reputation and, by extension, the Hunt Foundation. Grayson and Eliza had received threats, and every move they made seemed to draw even more attention. One evening, after another exhausting day at the office, Eliza sat in her apartment, flipping through the notes for an upcoming event. The foundation's first official fundraising gala was only days away, and Eliza had been working overtime to prepare. She was grateful for the work, for the chance to prove herself, but she couldn't ignore the gnawing sense of uncertainty inside her. Maya had been doing well since her surgery, the medical bills all paid by the foundation, but Eliza couldn't help but worry about the future. Her daughter's health was still fragile, and Eliza wasn't sure how long she could keep up this whirlwind life. There was so much pressure. Grayson's expectations, the board's expectations, her own expectations. It was all becoming too much to bear. Her phone buzzed, interrupting her thoughts. It was a message from Grayson. "We need to talk about the gala. Meet me in my office tomorrow morning at 9. Eliza sighed, setting the phone down. She knew this was a critical moment. The gala was a big step for the foundation, and the stakes were high. But she also knew that there was something deeper at play. She couldn't quite put her finger on it, but she felt like the closer they got to success, the more perilous their situation became. Was it all worth it? Was Grayson really as committed to this as he seemed, or was this just another corporate move for him? The thought weighed heavily on her as she settled into bed, trying to push the questions aside. She had to keep going, for Maya, for George's legacy, for the foundation. The next morning, Eliza arrived at Grayson's office early, as always. She was surprised to find that he was already there, standing by the window, looking out over the city. "Eliza," he said without turning around, his voice steady. "We're at a crossroads here." She stepped inside, closing the door behind her. "What do you mean?" Grayson turned to face her, his expression serious. "The gala is just the beginning. If we want the foundation to succeed, we need more than just financial backing. We need people to believe in us. We need to convince the public that we're more than just a charity. It's about changing the way people think about giving." Eliza nodded, feeling the weight of his words. It was more than just a fundraiser. This was a chance to change everything. "We'll get there," Grayson continued, his voice softer now. "But I need you to trust me, Eliza. Trust that this isn't just about saving face. This is about something real, something bigger than all of us." Eliza stared at him, searching his face for the truth. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to trust him. But something about the way he said it made her uneasy. Was he doing this for her? Or was he doing it for himself? "I'm ready to do whatever it takes," she said, her voice steady, but there was a flicker of doubt in her heart. "But I need to know that we're on the same page, that we're both in this for the right reasons." Grayson's eyes softened, and for a moment Eliza saw the man she had come to care for. The man who had done so much for her and her daughter, the man who had shown her that there could be hope even in the darkest of times. "I promise you, Eliza," he said, his voice sincere, "this is about doing what's right. And you're a big part of that." As the conversation ended, Eliza felt a new resolve stirring within her. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about making a difference, about creating something that would last long after they were gone. It wouldn't be easy, and it would come with its fair share of challenges, but for the first time in a long time, Eliza felt like she was exactly where she needed to be. The foundation had taken off in ways Eliza could never have imagined. What had started as a small initiative in honor of her father, George, had transformed into something monumental, an organization that was helping families across the country. Grayson, who had once been known for his cold, calculating business tactics, was now being celebrated as a philanthropist, someone willing to take risks for the greater good. His public image, once tarnished by rumors and scandal, had been redeemed by the foundation's success. Eliza had settled into her new role as executive director with surprising ease. She had found her stride, balancing the demands of the foundation with her responsibilities as a mother. Maya's health had improved dramatically, thanks to the surgery and the ongoing care provided by the foundation. Eliza often marveled at how far they had come. It felt like a lifetime ago that she had walked into Grayson's office, a desperate mother with nothing left to lose. But even as the foundation flourished, there was still the quiet tension between her and Grayson. They had become partners in every sense of the word, but the emotional distance between them was hard to ignore. Grayson had kept his promise. He had fought for her and for the foundation, but he still wasn't ready to open up about his past or about why he had risked everything for her in the first place. Eliza had tried to push aside her doubts. She knew that Grayson's motivations weren't entirely selfless, but she also knew that he had been genuine in his desire to make a difference. He had given her the chance to build something meaningful, something that would carry on her father's legacy. One evening, after a long day at the foundation, Eliza found herself standing in front of her apartment building, staring up at the city skyline. The lights of the city twinkled below, and for a brief moment she felt at peace. Everything had changed. She had changed. She was no longer the desperate woman she had once been. She was a leader, a woman with purpose, and for the first time in years, she could see a future for herself and her daughter. But that peace was short-lived. As she entered her apartment, her phone buzzed with a message from Grayson. "We need to talk. Can you meet me at the foundation in 30 minutes?" Her heart skipped a beat. Something in his message felt different. The urgency in his words, the brevity. Eliza couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. When she arrived at the foundation's headquarters, the building was dark, save for a single light shining from Grayson's office. Eliza walked inside, her footsteps echoing in the empty halls. She had never been here at night, and the silence felt heavy, as if the weight of the world was pressing down on them. Grayson was standing by the window when she entered, looking out at the city. His back was turned to her, but she could feel the tension in his posture, the way he was holding himself. "Eliza," he said quietly, without turning around, "I've been thinking a lot about what's next." Eliza stepped closer, unsure of where this conversation was headed. "What do you mean?" Grayson finally turned to face her, his eyes intense. "I've been offered a deal," he said, his voice steady but laced with something Eliza couldn't quite place. "A corporate buyout. Blackwood Enterprises has been struggling, and the board thinks a merger is the only way forward, but there's something else." Eliza's heart sank. She had known that the corporate world was unpredictable, but the idea of Grayson being forced into a merger, into giving up control of his own company felt like a betrayal of everything he had worked for. "Are you considering it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Grayson took a deep breath, his expression conflicted. "I don't know," he admitted. "Part of me wants to protect everything we've built, the foundation, the work we're doing, but another part of me—" His voice trailed off, and Eliza could see the weight of the decision in his eyes. She knew what this meant for him. He had spent his entire life building Blackwood Enterprises, and now it was all slipping away. "Another part of you what?" Eliza pressed, her heart racing. Grayson's gaze softened, and he took a step closer to her. "Another part of me wants something more," he said quietly. "Something different, something real." Eliza felt a shiver run down her spine. She had always known that Grayson was driven by something deeper, but she hadn't realized how much he was willing to sacrifice for it. "Are you asking me to help you decide?" she asked, her voice trembling. Grayson met her gaze, his eyes filled with uncertainty. "No," he said softly. "I'm asking you to help me understand what matters more. The empire I've built, or the future we could create together." For the first time, Eliza saw the vulnerability in Grayson that had always been hidden beneath the surface. He wasn't just a businessman anymore. He was a man who was willing to risk everything, not just for the foundation, but for the chance at something more. Eliza's heart clenched. She wasn't sure what to say, how to respond. The future was uncertain, and everything was changing so fast. But as she looked at Grayson, she knew that this moment was more than just a decision about business. It was a decision about their future, together. "Whatever happens," she said softly, "we'll face it together. Whatever you choose, we'll make it work." Grayson nodded slowly, his expression softening. "I don't know what the future holds, but I know this. This is just the beginning." As they stood there, in the quiet of the empty building, Eliza realized that their journey wasn't over. It was just beginning. Together, they had created something far greater than either of them had ever imagined. And no matter what came next, they would face it as partners, fighting for what was right, fighting for the people they loved, and fighting for a future they both believed in.